welcome back to Room 237, and this is another Giallo review. This is one that I was actually supposed to get for Christmas, but it came in late. It came in today, actually. And it is the final Umberto Lenzi Giallo that I actually needed to see and get for the collection. And it's 1971's An Ideal Place to Kill. This is the Mondo Macabro Blu-ray. So 1971, this came out in between A Quiet Place to Kill and Seven Bloodstained Orchids, which was before Knife of Ice. So it came out sort of during the Carol Baker, the Lenzi Baker cycle, but she wasn't in it. Originally, I think it was the producer wanted her, but Lenzi had other plans. Now, the title for this is kind of messy, along with other Lenzi films, because it was actually, its original title, I believe its original title, was Oasis of Fear. Well, the original Italian title is An Ideal Place to Kill, but it was mostly known as Oasis of Fear, which is what it's known as if you buy it from Shameless. I think this is the first time it was released in America. Shameless, it was Oasis of Fear, but also known as Dirty Pictures and Deadly Trap, which there was another film at that time called Deadly Trap. And I think in Japan it was called Love Stress, but it wasn't released in America until '74 as Oasis and Dirty Pictures, which when you buy Shameless, it comes as Oasis of Fear, then the flip art is Dirty Pictures. Oddly enough, all the titles kind of make sense, which is kind of rare for Giallo. I like this title the best. Again, even though they all make sense. Now, this one is, well, actually, more about the title because it sounds a lot like his previous Giallo, A Quiet Place to Kill, and then that's a whole other mess because that was called Paranoia, as Orgasmo was also called Paranoia, but in opposite countries of release. So a number of his films are a mess when it comes to their titles. But if you're shopping for Giallo, Ideal Place to Kill and Oasis of Fear is the same film. I would suggest getting the Mondo Macabro Blu-ray. Now, of course, it was directed by Lenzi and written by Lenzi and Lucia Drudy Demby and Antonio Altaviti, produced by Carlo Ponti, who Ponti was the one that wanted Carol Baker. And originally, Lenzi originally wanted, who was it? I can't. Oh well. He wanted someone else, but they eventually ended up giving the role to Irene Pappas, who was in Don't Torture a Duckling, and also stars Ornella Muti and Ray Lovelock, who's been in a bunch of films. He actually is uncredited for singing the theme song, which has a very Beatlesy type sound to it, which makes sense because Muti and Lovelock play these English young hippie teens, and Lenzi wanted it to capture like the hippie feel of the 60s. At one point he even wears like a dress shirt that looks like the British flag, which is on the Oasis of Fear cover. And originally he intended this to be sort of a cash-in on the success of Easy Rider with, young hippies. Originally he wanted them smuggling drugs across Europe, but someone said no, and then someone suggested pornography, which is what they end up doing. And yeah, it's about these two British teens they're smuggling pornography, then they run out, so they take pictures of themselves and of her. They get in trouble, they get kicked out of Italy, they end up in Sweden. I believe they end up in Sweden. And they end up at this one house, which they call an Oasis, this lone villa out in the middle of nowhere, where this woman named Barbara lives, played by Pappas. And from there, you kind of get this Orgasmo type film. It does feel a lot like Orgasmo or Quiet Place to Kill, or to a smaller extent, Spasmo. Yeah, it's one of those gialli where it's these people kind of holding someone captive, or, you know, everyone kind of stuck in this one house, but someone's in control, holding someone else captive. Only the opposite of Orgasmo is we're supposed to sympathize with the young rebel teens, because Barbara seems like she has something to hide, and we don't know what that is until later. And I enjoyed this film. I've enjoyed a number of his gialli. I don't think I've ranted on any, to be honest. And the thing about Lenzi is really only Seven Bloodstained Orchids and Spasmo, an Eyeball, I guess. Or rather, Seven Bloodstained Orchids, Knife of Ice, and I guess Eyeball are really his only conventional gialli. He's never really been constricted by formula. Whether it was the pre-Argento 60s gialli, where it was more like what Bava started, or post-Argento, where everyone followed his formula. Lenzi just kind of did his own thing. And I think that's what helped made him a pioneer of his own. Which I have heard people say Bava started gialli, Lenzi helped make it popular, Argento made it what it was. But you do have a great cast. I mean, Muti, Lovelock, and Pappas all do a great job. The dubbing is one of those movies where the dubbing is pretty bad acting. But, yeah, once they get caught with their self-made dirty pictures, which is where the title comes from, they go on the run. They have this sort of Bonnie and Clyde type relationship, which is kind of funny because he says he's this big rebel against authority, but then he wears like a Union flag shirt, and she's supposed to be this agent and huge supporter of sexual liberation, but she gets really mad when Barbara seduces him. Which their names are Richard and Ingrid. I almost forgot her name. But they stop off at her villa they're gonna steal gas from her car. She catches them. She kicks him up and says, hey, why don't you actually hang out? I came off as hostile. And, they stay with her for a little bit. They kind of have a party where they drink and dance and kind of get a little flirty. She seduces Richard. And then the next morning is when she starts acting strange. She locks both of them in their rooms. He finds a bunch of money in his pocket. His belt is missing. And when he gets out, she's on the phone with the police. He thinks she's calling the police because, it's all over the radio. There's these porn smugglers. And I can't really say much more without getting into spoilers, but you do have some of the great hallmarks of Lenzi, the not very still camera, a lot of zooms and close-ups, a lot of scenes where he's shooting the mirror, like everything we're seeing is through like the mirror's reflection, which I've always liked that. There's even a scene that's like from the inside of a trunk, kind of looking out through the crack because it's not closed all the way. you get some good camera angles. It does have your typical, something we've seen in many gialli, the kind of ending. I won't say what it is now, but you have the final thing at the ending and then just abrupt, credits. But it does kind of go a little slow at first, in between, like, them being invited back in to her house after stealing gas, and then the next morning where they start suspecting something is up with Barbara. That's kind of the slow point, but as it goes on, it does get better, and eventually it does kind of play with your expectations. Like, who are we supposed to be rooting for? These young kids who are holding her captive in her own house, or this mysterious woman that we don't really know what's going on with her. But she says that her husband is a colonel. He, he should be on his way home by now. And actually, she's talking to, I don't remember if I can't really say that either. I guess I'll get into spoilers, but if you liked Orgasmo or A Quiet Place to Kill or Spasmo, ones like that where it's people holding someone in one area, then I think you'll really dig this. It has just enough to be similar to those, but the overall story and the outcome is different enough to stand on its own. Plus, you get all the trademarks of, the technical aspects of a Lenzi film. The score, there was parts of it that I really enjoyed. Some of it even reminded me of, what was it? I can't remember. It reminded me of something kind of somber and quiet, but also kind of, pleasant at the same time. Which the score was done by Bruno Lauzi, who I don't recognize any of these titles, so alright. He's done a lot of sitar work, which is a lot of the score. But yeah, all the performances, especially the three main performances, are done well. The dubbing is really bad, but you can get over that. It does have very inept, well, actually, the police in this is more so the military, because her husband is a colonel, but I'll get into that more with spoilers. So I enjoyed this. If you like Lenzi's other work, especially Orgasmo or A Quiet Place to Kill, I think you'll enjoy this as well. So with that, I'm going to get into spoilers. So there's this one guy that she talks to on the phone, Barbara, a couple times, who I think we're supposed to believe is her husband, or at least to a point, but we find out eventually he's a lawyer. And he tries to reach her several times, but that's when, the following morning, when they realize something's up, Richard disconnects the phone and he keeps trying to reach her. But when they realize that she has completely cleaned out the house, erased their existence, put money in his pocket, took his belt, and, locked them in their rooms, they think she's gonna turn them in and make it look like a robbery. But it's when they go to leave and they realize they can't drive off with their own plates, which they have this really old MG car that's yellow with flowers on it, because of course they do. They decided to take her plates, but they can't take the plate off without getting into the trunk. So they open the trunk, they find the body of her husband, whom she had killed before the film starts. He was already dead when they showed up. And, he's tied with Richard's belt. It was part of her whole plan. She wanted it to look like a robbery and a murder. That's why she invited them to stay, so she could get away with it. But then he realizes, at one point in the night when they're having their little party, she sends him out to the garage, into the glove box to get a pack of cigarettes, and he finds a 6-shooter, which he starts playing with, and then she makes him put it away. He realizes that that gun is now missing, and it has his prints all over it. So there's a good chunk of the film of them holding her captive, trying to get her to tell them where the gun is, so they can clean it and be on their way. At one point, Richard leaves to go into town to find a way to get money so he can buy paint, so they can paint over their car, which he does. And I think it's like house paint. When we see him painting it, they're painting it black with just like regular brushes. I think it's house paint. But there's this one accident where a driver hit a young girl and killed her, then drove off, hit and run. So they're like, the military's canvassing, or maybe it's the police and the military, I think, because the military does show up looking for the colonel, which is her husband, but the police are canvassing the area looking for the car that could have done it. So they end up at the villa. And this is showing them how inept they are, because, you know, Richard has Barbara, you know, gagged in the other room. Ingrid is acting like they left and she's just a guest. But then one of the police dogs gets in the garage. Actually, no, that's later, but one of the officers is about to lift the trunk because it's not shut all the way. That's when we get that from inside view. So she pretends to faint. So they take her outside, and then they just don't follow up on that. They don't go back and finish looking everything over. But then that's when they leave. They do find the gun. They clean it off, which there is one point where they have Barbara tied to a chair, and Richard like undoes her shirt, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he keeps bringing it closer to her nipple like he's gonna burn her if she doesn't say anything, but she doesn't give, and that's when he says, all right, I can't do it. But eventually, and then to let her know that they know about the body, is he burns the belt in front of her. But eventually, they give her the sleeping pills. She falls asleep. They wipe the gun clean, put it in her hand. They go through her wardrobe to put on like really sophisticated clothes so they don't look like young hippies anymore. Get in their new painted black car, and they drive off. But by this point, the lawyer and the police show up, and she gives the police the story of how it was a robbery and they shot her husband, which it was said earlier in the film that she had a quarrel with her husband. We find out it had to do with adoption, and while she's telling the police the story of how they came in and they shot him and then drugged her, she woke up with the gun, we're seeing the real story in like flashback. She was told by the lawyer to talk to him about adoption, but when he came home, she just came out and shot him and then stuffed him in the trunk. And the thing they didn't, that Richard and Ingrid didn't account for, was she had this sort of contingency plan where she hid the trunk keys with this reel of, nude photos of Ingrid somewhere, and the police find it. They find the nude photos of Ingrid, the keys, which one of the military guys that was there when she pretended to faint says, oh yeah, that's the girl that was here. So now they know that the porn smugglers are the ones that killed the colonel. But they think they're in the clear, so they stop off for a swim. When they go to leave, he hears on the radio that, they're looking for them. So they pull out. There's a roadblock of cops. You have your Giallo car chase. This dog runs out the road. They swerve. They go down, and we see this car crash. There's a couple of dummies flopping around, and then we just see their bodies down at the bottom of the cliffside, dead. End credits. Which, the guy with the dog, that's how the cops get to the villa, because she's all drugged up and asleep. It's this one neighbor with the German Shepherd. Because there's one scene where they're having a chase through the house and they end up in the aviary. There's all these cool looking owls. It's actually it's a nice set piece. And there's a fight with some pruners, I think they are. Barbara has pruners. Richard's able to stop her. They get her back inside, and then this neighbor guy with the German Shepherd comes up, and he's like holding a knife to her. It's like, tell him to go away, through the window. It's like, I heard something in the aviary, and you sure you're okay? But then when they drive off for good at the end, he's still walking his dog. He sees them leave. He thinks something's off. The dog runs into the garage, sniffs the body. He checks it, and then next thing we know, the cops are at the house. So he found her, and they called the police. I was actually expecting, I was kind of expecting the kids to die at the end, but a lot of times in Giallo like this, both parties will kind of not get what they want. I was expecting there to be one final clue that would tie Barbara to the murder so she couldn't get away with it. Even so, if the kids did still die, it kind of would have been in vain, or they could have got away with it the whole time. But yeah, I was kind of expecting both to happen, but instead she got away with it and they died, which I'm okay with. But yeah, I thought this was a solid Giallo. So now I've seen all, I don't even remember how many he's done this scene. Orgasmo, So Sweet, So Perverse, Quiet Place to Kill, this, 7 Bloodstained Orchids, Knife of Ice, Spasmo, and Eyeball. And I have seen and reviewed all 8 of his Gialli, along with Eaten Alive and Nightmare City. I still need to get a few more of his cannibal films and some other films, but this was the last Giallo I had of his, and I pretty much liked all of them. Like I said, I don't think I've ranted on any. But yeah, I thought this one was solid. I enjoyed it. I would have to say he's probably the best at this kind of Giallo. I mean, if you want to call people kind of trapped or being held in one house, like, I think you could even put ones like Fox with a Velvet Tail in its own way like that. But Lenzi really, I think, kind of made that a formula of itself, like his own kind of Giallo formula. And I think it worked, because I think those are actually some of his best ones. I'd probably still say Orgasmo is probably my favorite. But yeah, I still thought this was good. I'm glad I got it, and now I have all of his Gialli. But anyway, I'm still expecting 10 Gialli to come in the mail, one more tribute homage film, and then this tribute homage film, Francesca, by the Onetti brothers, who also did Sono Profondo and Abracadabra. So I will be doing this at some point, which I am excited for. But so yeah, stay tuned for all those, and I will do my Dexter finale, New Blood finale video, and the season overview video. So stay tuned for all of those, and thank you for watching.